Lake City. Officials say they received a 911 call, but because of poor cell service, they couldn't make out who was in trouble and where. There were, however, able to trace the skiers to the avalanche location. Fox's Sydney Glenn has that story, and then following that, we'll have an expert of avalanches in Utah break down what this season has brought them besides this deadly event.
Reporting with the Utah Avalanche Center says we are seeing unprecedented avalanche conditions out here right now. He says the only other time we've ever seen 4 people killed in one single avalanche was back in 1992. It's a day that will go down in history. 8 people caught in an avalanche. 4 of them never made it home.
It's tragic, and our heart goes out to them. Our deepest condolences to you. This is horribly tragic.
Saturday's accident makes for 6 people who have died in Utah avalanches in less than a month. Craig Gordon with the Utah Avalanche Center teared up just thinking about it.
I know that everyone loves the snow in the mountains as much as I do. And it is very hard to see young lives who have that exact same passion who no longer are able to share that with their friends and their family.
Gordon says this warm winter is making for very dangerous conditions in Utah's backcountry.
So the foundation is structurally compromised. It's like a bunch of dominoes sticking up like this. We put a dense, heavy slab on top, we kick the dominoes over, and boom. Now we're staring down the barrel of a very dangerous avalanche.
People should check the avalanche forecast before they do anything in the backcountry. Plus have the proper avalanche rescue gear and know how to use it.
Once we have to deploy that, that means that the accident has already happened. And as we have seen in recent events, the outcome is devastating. It's tragic. It's catastrophic.
The last time more than one person died in a single Utah avalanche was in 2013. Gordon says it's just so difficult to see the tragedy this year has already brought, knowing the snowpack is still very unstable.
This is unprecedented. To have 6 avalanche fatalities in just the span of less than a month, it gives a really good indicator how sketchy things are right now, how deceptively tricky the avalanche conditions are, and unfortunately, this isn't a condition that's changing anytime soon.
Even though we do have some snow storms in our forecast coming up, Craig Gordon says that will actually only make things more dangerous. He says in order to really get things under control, we need several strong, consistent snowstorms to help with the snowpack. In Millcreek Canyon, Sydney Glenn, Fox 13 News, Utah.
Well, kind of a cool opportunity that we have here on NewsNOW from Fox is to bring you these stories and dive deeper to give you some more context. I'm going to bring in Mark Staples, who is with the Avalanche Center out there. I believe that may have been one of your colleagues that she was interviewing. So what is the latest on this story? Do you have any more to expand on for not only these deaths that happened this weekend, but also the whole avalanche season this year?
Well, we're still trying to figure out exactly where everyone was at the time of the accident. It's typically we have avalanche fatalities. There is one, and usually it's less complicated. In this case, with about 8 people in the area, 4 losing their lives, it's been really tricky to figure out where everyone was when the avalanche happened, what they were doing before the avalanche happened. And, in such a traumatic event, it takes a while to piece all that together and get that information from the survivors. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
And, is this a more active season than usual, or is it just they've been a lot worse and people have gotten caught up in them?
It is overall a more dangerous season. There's no question. It's not necessarily uncommon to have dangerous conditions like this. I think what's different is that they are persisting a little bit longer than we normally see them persist. And because the thing is that there are lots of different types of avalanches. And oftentimes by this point in the season, we're seeing avalanches that you have all these layers in the snowpack. And by this point in the season, oftentimes we see avalanches breaking in the upper layers. Just the avalanches are containing just the new snow, maybe the wind-blown snow. And those are more predictable. And they also stabilize faster. Right now, we're seeing avalanches break deep down near the ground over areas thousands of feet wide. And those are much less predictable, much more dangerous, much more deadly.
Yeah, for people who aren't as briefed on how avalanches form, can you take us through the cause and effect and how quickly that can happen?
Well, you know, what sets the stage for all this is what happens with the weather in the fall and early winter. And that really sets the stage for the entire winter. There are 4 ingredients you need to get what we call a slab avalanche. And that is a weak layer, a slab on top of that weak layer. Then you need a trigger, which is often us, or it can be really heavy snowfall or other things like that from Mother Nature. And then lastly, you need a steep slope. What we have in abundance this year is that weak layer. And you might have heard Craig talking about it earlier. Our snowpack, the snowpack is essentially a whole bunch of layers that are a record of the entire season's weather. And we're basically building a house or a building. And we've started off with a very, very poor foundation, which is that weak layer. And we keep adding floors on top of that. And the building is just teetering, ready to fall over. As soon as a person walks onto it, it's more they can take. The foundation crumbles, the entire building falls down, and that's the avalanche that comes crashing down the hill.
Is there even any time in those situations to prepare for it? If you're on a mountain and you're inexperienced when it comes to these avalanches, you know, what does that situation look like, and what should it look like?
Well, you know, first of all, you just want to avoid it, right? If you're in a bad accident, you know that the safety gear in your car, the airbag, your seatbelt, it could probably save your life, but really, you don't want to count on it. So, avoidance and understanding where avalanches happen is the first step. Second step is being prepared in case it does happen, and that involves having all the right rescue gear. And what can be done ahead of time is to train with that gear and know how to use it. The reason why is that when an avalanche happens, the clock starts ticking. Someone's buried in the snowpack, and they need you to find them and get them out because they need air ASAP.
I'm reading a really interesting statistic right now. It says that between January 30th and February 6th, 15 people died in avalanches in the United States, the most that time frame has had since 1910. 4 died in Colorado during that time. You know, are we attributing any of this to changes in conditions, or what are your thoughts on why they're happening more frequently, or is it just that people are out in them more often?
Well, there are a couple different reasons. One, the most fundamental rule we teach and we try and follow when we're out in the mountains, and it's not to say that we can't go wrong, but the idea is that you only expose one person at a time to a particular slope that is steep enough to slide. And the reason is if all goes wrong, you ideally have just one person involved and everyone else around can help do the rescue. And the odds of someone surviving that can be a lot higher than when you have multiple people buried. So that's the first thing. And in a lot of places, it's really obvious how to do that. In other places, like we saw this weekend here in Utah, some of that terrain, it's not very obvious to do that safely. The other issue is that it's probably just a bit random why sometimes we see more accidents than others. And then lastly, I think what we're seeing is we've got fairly dangerous avalanche conditions across large portions of the U.S., at least the western U.S., and that's attributed to a long, prolonged dry spell in November and December that created that weak foundation of the snowpack. And by all accounts, there are more people out this season than ever before. There were already growing numbers in the backcountry. For a lot of reasons, we're seeing a ton more people out. So you take very dangerous conditions and you overlay a lot more people, and you're going to get more accidents. It's a lot like during rush hour traffic. If you had an ice storm make the roads really icy, and right when everyone's trying to get home and the roads are packed, there's a good chance you're going to see more accidents.
Man, it's just, it's so interesting to hear how Mother Nature can do these. The pictures and videos of the avalanche are just insane and probably really scary when you're seeing them happen in live action. So we appreciate you educating us on this. Do you have any last thoughts on the story from this weekend, or just avalanches and in general?
Yeah, you know, what's really interesting and particularly deceptive about snow is that in a lot of other sports and things in the mountains, you can often see the hazard. You can see what you need to avoid. If you're on a river and you're kayaking or rafting, you can see the hole in the river you have to avoid. If you're mountain biking, you can see the little tricky section on the trail that you need to go around, or so on and so forth. When you're in the mountains on snow, all you see is just beautiful powder below you, and you don't see this obvious danger. If you dig down in the snowpack, it can be really obvious. But when you're standing there with skis or a snowboard on your feet or on the seat of a snowmobile, you just see something that looks really fun. And so it makes it really hard to know the dangers that you're facing.
Well, Mark, we appreciate you being here with us on News Now from Fox to give us a glimpse at your expertise with the Utah Avalanche Center out there. Have a great day and stay safe. Hopefully, I mean, it's really interesting to hear about this, but hopefully we don't have to talk about you or talk to you too much, too often with these unfortunate events with these avalanches. But again, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Daytona.
And we have a couple other live reports that we're going to be getting to in the next hour as well, from stories that we've been following since earlier this morning. But speaking of snow, I want to